The majority of undocumented students who enroll in college actually enroll in community colleges, right? So there are different ways that this subject can be approached, right? As a high school educator, there's a way that you can, either counsel your students to go to community college or not to go. As a community college educator, there's other needs that you need to address. And then if you're an educator in a 4-year institution, there are needs that you have to address for transfer students, right? People who went to community college. So we kind of briefly want to talk about our experiences as community college students, because all 3 of us actually went to a community college, and we just want to kind of share a little bit of our experiences and the needs that we kind of feel that should be addressed a little more, right? And the things that you have to be aware of as an educator. So.
So considering that the first point is that now that we have all these resources, that the California Dream Act has passed, that we have AB 540, and that we'll have deferred action recipients pretty soon, or we have some already. Now we need to make sure that students understand that all undocumented students should be encouraged to attend 4-year universities, because financial hardship is not such a big issue anymore. Although it is still, a financial burden, we should still encourage all students to apply, even if we think that they might not have the grades or they might have a hard time coming up with the money. We push them towards trying to go into 4-year institutions. However, we understand that not everyone is the dream child that we hear in the news that has a 4.0 or a lot of support from their peers, from their family. So whenever there is a low GPA and they're not able to get accepted into university, or they haven't completed the A through G requirements, sometimes there are family obligations or circumstances that they can't maybe move away from home, they have to care for someone, or financial hardship. Those are very real concerns that maybe gears students towards applying into a community college. But of course, I know that you all as educators and as counselors, you will try to address those needs and make sure that that's really not a roadblock for them, and if they can be addressed. But if the student does decide to go to a community college, we hope that you help them see it like a step on the road. I know personally, as a high school student, when I found out that I had to go to community college because I couldn't afford going to a 4-year institution, it became like a consolation prize, like, oh, well, you're gonna have to go there, or some people just go because that's the next step, but they don't see themselves graduating from a 4-year university. They don't see that as their goal. They just see that as, I'm going to community college, but what's ahead? What's after that? So, which leads us to another point. So if your student does decide to go to a community college, make sure that they're very aware of the financial options. Many times in the FAFSA workshops and all this, we talk about dorming, and we talk about how you're going to figure, the loans, the work study, all this stuff. But what about the things that are particular to community college, which is the BOG waiver, EOPS, CalWorks, the scholarships? So making sure that students are really aware of those resources that they can take advantage of now. If you have college fairs on your campus, make sure that community colleges are represented, not just 4-year institutions. It's really important that they get to meet people face-to-face, and they can talk to these representatives. And another point is that there's a lot of AB 540 groups out there in community colleges now and in 4-year institutions that are close to your high schools, and that can be a great resource in terms of just connecting students and having high school students, seeing them as models, as inspiration, as using them for information and all of that. So if you are not sure whether your surrounding schools have those kind of groups, maybe doing a little bit of research. For example, we get workshop requests from the OC, and it's so hard for us to go all the way out there when there's OC Dream Team right there that could help them out, and that you can really help build community by using them, by contacting them, and using them as a resource. Also, you can request a workshop, form these groups, or just have them come talk to your AB 540 group in your high school, or I don't know, maybe have them meet with a couple of your students. Also, another important resource is getting the contact person from admissions or financial aid departments that specialize in AB 540 student matters. A lot of, now that we have AB 540 and that we have the California DREAM Act, a lot of institutions now have a point person to deal with these matters specifically, because as four-year institution students, we still go to financial aid and they still can't answer our questions, and they still look at us with a puzzled face like they don't know what we're talking about. So making sure that you have that contact person, and that if your student's going to go to that school, you tell them, hey, talk to this person. If you have a question with your application, go see this person. You know, they can help advise you. Also encourage them to excel academically. There's so many programs like honors program, UPS, TAP, TAG. I did not know about all these programs until like my second year in community college, when some students are already about to transfer out. So like I said, it shouldn't be like a consolation prize or just like something that you're doing, but they can still challenge themselves academically, especially those students that do have 4.0s and that, you know, are involved, but they can go to a four-year institution. They can really take advantage of all these programs, as well as the summer bridge programs. A lot of students are not aware of these, and you know, they find out until it's way too late. Everyone's aware of what the summer bridge program is? Anyone? Yeah. So it's just a program that helps them transition into the community college. And lastly, I wanted to make sure that students understand the difference between community college and a private technical school like ITT Tech, University of Phoenix, all these schools, because when they don't have those great grades and those SAT scores, they think that just that route is not for them, and when they see that these institutions will accept them no matter what, as long as they're 18 or something, they might be persuaded into going here. And now that we have deferred action and the California DREAM Act, I know institutions like these might target our students because now they can get loans, now they have Cal grants, and they can use them for these institutions.
Some of the Cal grants will not go to some of these institutions anymore. Some of them, actually, there's a list on the California website that some of these technical schools will no longer get Cal grants. So they need to be aware of that too.
Oh, okay, great point. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, and if there are also some students I've come across, undocumented students that want to go into culinary schools or automotive technology, other careers that they might not be able to get financial aid and that they might have to take out loans. This is something new to us. It's new territory. We've never been able to take out a loan. So if you can please be a support to those students and guide them and let them know what their options are, and just being safe about it, making sure that they don't get scammed and they can find the best possible way to finance their education.
So I guess one of the most important points from this topic is, before, undocumented students, since they weren't able to get any type of financial aid, even if they had a 4.0 and they had met all their requirements to go to a four-year institution, they would go to a community college, right? Because they thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to afford a Cal State or a UC, right? So like the most important point for you as an educator is to make sure that you're aware of all the financial opportunities that are now available, and that if you see that 4.0 student who wants to go to community college, let them know, right? Like, you don't have to do that. You can afford to go to 4-year now, right? So next.
Okay, well, hello everybody. Once again, I'm going to be discussing about the community college educators and what they can do to promote transferring, because many students, when they were not aware of the academic and financial resources, they just lost themselves within the community college system and never transferred. So to further elaborate on what Lynette has said, for the educators, like you all who are here with the information, you all have the opportunity to take advantage of your faculty meetings to educate all the other counselors and teachers and tell them about the AB 540 law, DACA, and California DREAM Act, because despite the fact, they need to really know that there are undocumented students in the community college and that they have the agency to help them out and hopefully transfer to a foreign university of their choice. So in terms of finances, just like Lynette has mentioned, in case there is still no committee or task force at the community college to allocate the funds for them, please create one. I know at the community college where I'm from, at Citrus College, actually there's a task force. They're going to send out emails next month to all the registered 8540 students on how they can apply for the California DREAM Act. So in case there is no task force at the community college, please make networks with financial aid. And make it easy to accessible as well, because not all students are ready to out themselves and say, I'm undocumented, give me help with money. So at least promote it heavily throughout the campus, make it accessible online as well. So in addition to that, in terms of academics, even despite the fact that we are having DACA, we're having financial aid, we are all undocumented, we still do not have a social security. So there will be institutional limits as to what we can achieve in an educational institution. So for those who have the opportunity to engage with undocumented students or are promoting the campus resources, to heavily instill the fact that whether or not AB 540 students qualify for programs like the honors program, especially now EOP&S, CalWorks, the technical programs, or the honor societies, to heavily reinforce to them like they do qualify. Not all students want to out themselves saying, oh, what can I enroll in this? So it's very necessary to promote in any way that it's possible. In addition to that, once these students do come to community college, and some who do not know anything about higher ed, we need to explain to them the differences between Cal States, UCs, and privates, and emphasize that with research, a lot of privates actually do offer full rights to undocumented students. And I didn't know that until I transferred, so the students, they need to know that. And in addition to that, utilize your own networks as an educator to guide them to other resources in the institutions and where they want to transfer to, and specifically other undocumented students on campus. And if there's an undocumented student group on campus, even better. And next one, please. And for some, like at my community college when I was there was no AB 540 student support group. So every campus has its own context and tolerance for AB 540 students. So luckily, the outreach program noticed that there was a high demand for, there was a lot of undocumented students. And so they outreached to counselors, and the counselors outreached to the students they knew, and then us students talked to other undocumented students. And we all created a task force within within 6 months, we officially became a group. So this is also for the high school students, in case there is no AB 540 undocumented club on campus, to please create one, because there's nothing more, yes?
I don't want to interrupt, but when you're done, I want to ask a question about that.
Oh, okay. So it's very important, even in the high school and a community college, to create the support network among students, because it's very difficult to talk about your stories, to explain that you do want to go to higher ed. So at least engaging with other students will help out a lot and increase the motivation to then transfer.
You said at the community college level, the students are identified probably through the application process, right? The high school level, we have a very difficult time finding these students, and I've been doing your conferences for the past 3 years, so I'm a teacher, and at my school, the counselors now send students to me if they say something. So maybe I'll get 4 or 5 students a year, and I always tell them, you have any friends out there, tell your friends, and I'm getting a little bit more, and now this year I got like 10, okay? So how do you guys recommend that we do outreach, that we do find who these students are, and if we do start a club such as this one, a task force, should we call it the AB 540 Club, or the DREAM Act Club, or what names so that the students understand and can identify with it and feel comfortable coming in?
Yeah, like you said, for high school students, it's a lot more difficult because it's a lot more difficult to identify them as such. But I guess one of the ways that you can do it is like when you have any type of college fairs or workshops or financial aid workshops, make sure they're inclusive. Because like a high school student being 17, 16, it's not gonna raise their hand and be like, oh, I'm undocumented, how does this apply to me, right? Like 1 out of 100 will do that, right? So one of the things that you can do is like whenever you have a college fair, a transfer fair, or whatever, make sure that you're inclusive. Like you mentioned, oh, if you happen to be AB 540, this is how this would apply to you, right? You can also get financial aid and stuff like that. So that way, at least if they don't come out as undocumented, they know that it applies to them. And one of the reasons why being undocumented you are hesitant to come out is because no one ever talks about you, right? No one ever mentions anything that relates to you, so it's harder for you to come out, right? So, what else? And if you start a club, the way you would name it is like, I don't know, it depends, but I guess the Dreamer Club is like a very generic term or something, and stuff like that. So let's move on to the next slide.
And those are just resources in case you are going to create a support group or need to network if you already have an organization on campus. So this will be provided online, but it's organizations like the California Dream Network, the Ideas, United We Dream, the Bruin Resource Center, and of course the UCLA Labor Center as well.
It'll be on the website too. Okay, so what to do with community college students in four-year institutions, specifically undocumented students, right? And basically, like now that we have all these resources, the California Dream Act, the Deferred Action, like the biggest challenge now is to make sure that the students know about them, right? Because for like about 10 years, there has been a culture in the undocumented community where like, you can't get financial aid, you can't work, you can't do all these things. So you kind of like filter it out, right? So now we need to begin to open up the undocumented community to these resources. And like we mentioned before, like in the previous 10 years, like the challenge was how do we keep this 5 to 10% of undocumented students who enroll in college, how do we make sure that they graduate, right? But the challenge now is how do we make that number bigger now that they have all these resources, right? So there's a 90% of undocumented students who don't enroll, right? So that's what we have to target now, I guess. And yeah, and another challenge is like even though these laws have passed, many institutions who don't have that many undocumented students don't have the processes in place to allow these students to access their resources, right? So if you come from one of those institutions, one of the challenges is to be proactive and to talk to your financial aid office or to seek out these resources and make sure that there's a process for them to apply to these resources, right? And community college students or transfer students, they need to adapt as well, right? That's a need that even whether you're documented or undocumented, you have that challenge, right, as a transfer student to adapt into the new institution. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the things is like AB 131, which passed on June 2011, I believe, and it went into effect in January 1st, 2012. It allows for undocumented students to apply to private scholarships that are managed by your institution, right? So if your institution gets private donor scholarships or like alumni contributions, any type of scholarship that comes from private funds and your school receives it, now by law, undocumented students are allowed to apply for it, right? But the thing is that in many cases, like the financial aid offices or the scholarship office that handles these scholarships doesn't know that, right? And sometimes they don't have the processes in place. So one of the issues that as an educator you can be proactive about is to ensure that they do know about this law and that they have an application for undocumented students, right? If there needs to be a special application, like how do you go about making this application, right? So for instance, we at UCLA, they were very proactive about it, right? As soon as the law passed, they came out with an application. They sent out emails to make sure that all the undocumented students in campus knew that they could now apply for private scholarships and things like that. So many times, like if you come from a four-year institution, like the history department or the mathematics department will have special departmental scholarships, right? That's another area where like sometimes they don't even know that undocumented students exist, right? So they're not going to have a process for you to apply. So that's another area where you can be proactive. And I think the most important thing that you can do is like to encourage your student, if you have an undocumented student and you're not sure whether they qualify for this scholarship or that scholarship, if it's from private funds, encourage them to apply. because even if there isn't a process in place for a special process for undocumented students, once they receive it or once they have applied, they can contact the people who are running the scholarship or who are in charge of it and tell them, you know what, I'm undocumented and by law I'm allowed to get the scholarship. So how do I go about getting it, right? Question?
Would they contact, say, the math department or the history department directly and ask them about what scholarships they have? Is that how they would contact?
Yeah, so you would go to the department and ask them, oh, can I have a list of scholarships or something like that. And sometimes they have special people in charge of this particular scholarship or that particular scholarship, and that's who you would contact. But yeah, so like the most important thing to know is like what the law says, right? Like the law entails that you can get private scholarships even if they're managed by the institution, right? So encourage your students to apply for them even if it doesn't mention. Sometimes they even mention you have to be a California resident or a citizen, but once you call them and ask them and let them know about this law, they might be able to be flexible with those requirements, right? So let's go to the next one. Another huge issue is like research and internships, right? Like historically, this has been closed to undocumented students, right? They've never been able to apply for these things because they either needed a social security number or because they just couldn't, right? So it is still a tricky area, kind of, even after all these resources, but it's something that's very necessary to prepare for grad school, to prepare for future employment and stuff like that. And it isn't, like, it's not completely closed to undocumented students. There are ways to go about getting internships and research opportunities. So, for instance, an unpaid internship, it's usually open to undocumented students because they don't have to get paid, right? So they don't need to provide Social Security. So that's one of the things that you can encourage undocumented students to apply to, right? And now that they're going to be applying for their work permit and they're going to be possibly getting Social Security numbers and stuff like that, this is great experience for them to have. Once they get their work permit, they can get a job, right? Because they already have done an internship, right? And even in paid internships, there are ways that an undocumented student can get paid. Sometimes they can get paid through a stipend, which is now under AB 130. If the internship is being funded through state funds or private funds, they can get paid through a stipend, they can get paid through a scholarship grant or something like that, right? So even if they don't have a Social Security yet, there are ways for them to get paid, right? And sometimes they only want a Social Security for tax purposes, right? So if that's the reason why they want Social Security, then you can use a taxpayer's identification number instead of the Social Security. So like I said, encourage your students to apply to these things and talk to the people in charge and see if they can be flexible with these requirements, right? If they require a Social Security number. And of course, if they qualify for deferred action, which people will talk about later, encourage them to apply to that so that they can take advantage of these, right? And of course, research programs, like all these institutions have research programs, right? And the majority of these are funded through federal funds, so undocumented students cannot get into those programs yet because they come from federal funds. But some of them are either like funded through the school, through state funds, through private donors, private institutions. So if that's the case, then they can take advantage of that research, right? So it's always like, the most important thing to keep in mind is that undocumented students are not automatically excluded from a research opportunity or an internship, even if it's a paid one.